Hello, everyone. Jak Syn here on behalf of Fiend.com and Future Daze, and today is another exciting episode of Artist Interviews. Today, I am sitting with Edward, aka Sunglasses Kid. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. The sun's out, birds are chirping, the weather's nice. We're in that summer mood now.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's a pretty good day. I mean, I've got some time off of work. I'm happy. I can't complain.
Yeah, I mean everything's great except the world's sort of burning, but other than that, we're all good. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. You know what I mean? We're experiencing a lot of turmoil in the world, with everything happening with the pandemic and
Mm.
and just it's so much, but you know what? Hey, we can still find beauty within our own little areas of where we're at in the world. You know what I mean? Like just as simple as looking outside and tending to your plants, whatever you have going on in your life.
Yeah, I think for musicians and entertainers, I think now is sort of more than ever our kind of moment, and the entertainment is needed more than ever, and especially for the kind of big establishment kind of entertainment that's all been shut down, and films have been halted and productions have been halted. That people are kind of lacking that content, and I think for people particularly like producing stuff at home, now is our moment to kind of step up to it and kind of meet the demand. So it's an interesting time. As they say, in kind of dark and challenging times, often some of the best art is created. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of music and movies and whatever else comes out of this period, really.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because I really do think like what comes out of this area of our time is going to be amazing. We're seeing some pretty amazing things happening right now, but I'm sure we're going to continue to see some really amazing things happening as we kind of move out of this and back into kind of what we remember as what it was like before. So today we're going to ask you a couple of questions and see where it goes from here. Are you ready to get into it?
I am ready.
What are three of your most memorable moments from your musical career?
I think probably the most memorable moment I've had so far in, I don't know whether I call what I do a career, but my busy side hustle was the first time I ever played live, which wasn't actually that long ago. I mean, I when I was started making music, I didn't set out to be a live artist. I was kind of just making stuff behind my computer on my own, and I kept getting asked by people, when am I going to play live? And I got approached by a promoter behind a club event called Night Arcade, and it's based in Amsterdam, and he wanted to get me to headline this night, and this had Time Cop and College playing alongside it, and I was like, dude, I haven't got a live act, I'm not ready, I don't have keyboards, I don't have a laptop, I don't know what I'm doing, and this is too intimidating. And I sort of blew him out, said no, and then he came back to me having had another artist he had got instead. It had all fallen through at the 11th hour, and he came back saying, there's any way I can convince you to still do this? And I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I bought a laptop, I bought a keyboard, put them all in a sports bag, put it on a plane, and flew to Amsterdam, having never done a live show in my life. This was in the middle of Amsterdam dance event, and I got there, and it's great because I met Time Cop Geordie, who I'd known online as a sort of friend, and we both started making music around the same time. And also I knew that College was going to be there, so I was a bit like, oh, it's the mystical College from the Drive soundtrack from Real Hero. And they took us out for a meal on a boat, on a private canal boat. And there was just a moment where, so this is before the show had started, where I'm sitting on a private canal boat with Time Cop, College, Mattelvin, and me and Geordie would just kept laughing and looking at each other because we were eating this really like fancy meal. We were with College. I mean, I didn't dare talk to College. I ended up talking to him later that evening on the boat before the show. But it felt like we were being treated like absolute royalty. And it was a very unusual thing. And it was a big splash that Night Arcade wanted to do for their first ever kind of show. They wanted to kind of, launch their kind of club night and do it with a big bang and everything. And then later that night, I think around 1 a.m. was when I was on, and I did a performance, and it was during this huge thing called Amsterdam Dance Event, and it went down really well. And it was a moment, I think, it resonated. So I won't forget it because it was both utterly memorable in the way they treated us and how wonderful and amazing it was and everything. And but also it was a moment for me of kind of saying, you nearly said no to that, and sort of fate dealt you a second chance to say yes to it. And I think it always stuck with me, a kind of, sometimes there won't feel, a moment, an opportunity, you won't always feel ready for something, and sometimes you've got to dive in head first. And I was kind of like, well, I guess if the first time I ever perform live has to be during Amsterdam dance event in front of college alongside Time Cop, I guess I'm doing that. I'm not being offered a shallow end. So yeah, it was very memorable for those two reasons. Another one came to mind. I think it was the last gig I played, because I don't play a lot of gigs, but it was the last one I played. It was in London. There's a regular kind of big thing they do called Retro Future Fest, and they'd hired an Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonator to come and play, to come around and like sort of entertain the crowds whilst, because it was a kind of whole big warehouse sort of space. And we get chatting, and he won't come out of character. I've since spoken to him since out of character. He's actually like the UK's biggest Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonator and has met Arnold Schwarzenegger several times. But I had about 5 minutes before I was going on stage, so I like to get into a sort of zone. And the Arnie impersonator in his full Arnie gear comes up to me and goes, "Can you help me carry my guns to the photo shooting area?" And so I'm like, I'm a bit busy. I've got to go on in about 5 minutes, but okay. And so I'm carrying like the big minigun and the grenade launch and everything in this big box with Arnold Schwarzenegger down to the another area of the venue. And I remember just sort of thinking, this is the kind of madness that the sort of synthwave scene kind of attracts. And I mean, later that same evening, I had a friend of mine who's actually also a producer and a dancer. I had him come on stage and do the kickboxer, Van Damme drunk kickboxer dance on stage to a track that I'd written, and brought the sort of house down. Everyone was absolutely loving it. And it again was a sort of surreal moment. And again, that was one of these things where I've not really experienced a sort of scene or a live scene like it, in how positive it is. And it's sort of like, it's like Comic Con with music, it's like this kind of crazy sort of atmosphere. So yeah, those are two kind of times that sort of stick out to me recently, well, in the past and in the recent past. Yeah.
Those are some pretty memorable moments right there. I mean, you know what? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting that we're talking about your first memory. Fate dealt you a second chance to make this happen, and you up there performing with, yes, your first show, but you up there performing with college, Velvet, like you being up there doing that with these, like, I mean, for a lot of us, these really amazing trailblazers, I guess you could say. That's just amazing. Like, I'm sure you were just kind of going like, what is happening right now? Like, kind of like sitting around kind of going like, oh my God, I'm here. I'm with these people that I admire. This is just great.
Well, for me, I think it was strange, because me and sort of Georgie, Time Cop, were sort of going through the same experience. I mean, we're going through the same motions, really, which was, I consider me and Geordie sort of, we started at the same time. He's obviously done incredibly well and is a bigger sort of name than I am, but we both started making music at the same time, and I both think we would both consider someone like College to be a sort of first generation kind of originator of the synthwave sort of sound, and from the Valerie Collective. So to us, me and Geordie had become good friends online, like I said, and we had kind of encouraged each other along the way as we both were sort of growing as artists. And when we were sitting on that boat having this fancy meal and floating along the Amstel River, looking at the sun setting next to College, who's just this very quiet, unassuming Frenchman, we both just kept locking eyes at each other and just laughing, because we were so kind of excited by the whole thing. And like I said, when I stood out the back of the boat with College, because me and him both smoked, he leant into me and goes, Edward, never have I before been treated like this. I've played in Paris, Tokyo, New York, but nowhere so good. You will never be treated this well ever again. So enjoy it, whilst it lasts. And It was, yeah, it was extraordinary. And then the next day we were taken out for lunch after the gig, and we had a burger, and that's when I actually sat with college and spent time talking. That's when I finally decided to kind of bite the bullet and not ask him the geek questions about what computer he used and everything. And a real hero was produced on it was like a really low spec PC using PC speakers and Fruity Loops version 2. And that was the moment where I was like, it was just great to hear from somebody else who'd had a kind of hit, not producing it on all the state of the art stuff, and just to say, yeah, it really is about the idea and the execution of the idea. And, you know, so much time is spent talking about the tools and emphasizing the tools that you use to do the job rather than the job itself. So that was, again, sort of a memorable conversation that I kind of banked in my kind of experience.
It really is, you know, it really is about, you know, the creativity, and it's really nice to hear that, you know, when you're able to talk to an artist, you know what I mean, who just kind of going like, yeah, it's really about the experience, the expression, you know, what I want to convey to the world. I mean, it's not really necessarily about, you know, what kind of programs I used and whatnot. You know, it's really nice to see that, you know, hey, at its core, this is what all of the music is about. Doesn't matter what artist you are, what you create, this at its core is what it's about. Your feeling that you want to convey to the world through sound. Or whatever medium you choose to. So I mean, it's you know what, for me, you, a Sunglasses Kid, to me, and a lot of other people out there, you're one of the ones that are up there in my book as well. You know, I've been following you for a long time, and you've had such impressive stuff that you've put out, such amazing stuff that you've put out with all of your releases that you've done, even the little mini videos that you put out, you know what I mean, with the throwbacks to like the late 80s, early 90s videos, you know, like it's really great to see that, you know, you're constantly working and you're constantly tinkering away and kind of building on what you want to convey to the world. So I love seeing that from you.
Oh, well, that's very high praise indeed. I certainly don't feel, I find it hard almost to sort of, and I don't mean this to sound like sort of false modesty, I genuinely don't kind of, I find it hard to imagine anyone out there listening to anything I do. I mean, especially when I was sort of working on music right at the start, there really was no one listening to what I was doing, and I really wasn't taking it too seriously. But I guess I feel it more than ever. But I think what I try to do is almost sort of block that out of my head. So if I'm starting writing on something, it's a bit like trying to put those horses where they have the blinkers on. Like
Yes.
if you're in a football stadium with all the crowd around you, you know, that distraction. Sometimes it's like, if you start thinking too much about that, someone out there may listen to this song at some point and may have an opinion about this song and may go, oh, that's not as good as I hoped. Or I think that that can become quite a loud noise that can be quite distracting or incapacitating, and then you can feel sort of almost paralyzed, kind of getting off the starting block if you think too much about that. So it's more, that's the sort of motivation behind why I sort of don't try and think too much about who is out there listening or doing anything, almost because I don't want to become kind of too terrified to carry on, if you know what I mean. And that's a strange approach, but yeah.
I applaud you for everything that you've done, and I love it. I admire it. A lot of other people that I know out there admire it and love it. And you know what? I gotta say, you know, being able to do these events out here, like our synthwave events that we do, like San Junipero, you know, even my event, Future Daze. I mean, up there, it's like, I've enjoyed DJing your music in some of my sets, you know, 80s Baby, Can't Hide. Like, those are some, you know what I mean? They get the crowd going like, oh, yeah. Oh, you know what I mean? Like, really just getting them in the groove, because you are kind of like, I like to kind of think of your style as like, you know, you have like traditional, like, you know, synth wave and kind of like, you know, outrun and retro wave stuff. You have those kind of traditional sounds that you have over there, but your style, I think it like goes to the opposite end, you know, funky, like hip hoppy kind of like, you know, late 80s, early 90s like feel and like grooves like that. And I think that's really great, especially if you want to get the party like going, you know, and jumping, you know what I mean? I'm gonna go throw on some Sunglasses Kid right there.
I mean, that's totally it. Yeah, you've absolutely nailed it. I mean, and then the new album that I'm working on right now, and there's I was saying to you earlier, after this chat, I'm jumping on a call with my engineer who's just mixed the first track of 10 that he's going to be mixing, and that the one he's just mixed is a new Jak Swing style kind of beat with a R&B vocal and a rap in it and things like that. And there's going to be more. I've worked on a couple more kind of funky jams, a bit like Can't Hide. One with Miranda Carey, who did Can't Hide. But I've always taken influence from sort of 80s R&B and soul and jazz and funk. And yeah, like you say, when I'm selecting tracks to play live, I'm always thinking of what's going to work on the dance floor. And I know as I started playing live, I started thinking more about when I was approaching new songs, thinking, how's this going to work on the dance floor? And, what's the kind of vibe there? And yeah, I think it is. I think a lot of the synthwave music is very cinematic and kind of soundtracky. And I think a lot of it scans very well when you're listening kind of in your own headspace, or it goes great with video games, and there's plenty of places it works. Sometimes it doesn't always necessarily scan on the dance floor, but I don't know. I'd rather have music that worked really well in films and video games, and everyone's banging down my door to offer me money for that than so I'm not denigrating the music. I guess I think it's just a fact of life that certain music gets people up and dancing, and universally I'd say music with a sort of funky vibe will always get people dancing, and that is to do with the rhythm of funk and the kind of the sort of syncopation and the kind of beats popping ahead of the beat, and it makes you want to sort of move your shoulders. It makes you want to dance. There's that. It's the percussive nature and the syncopated nature of sort of funky music that it makes you instinctively want to start dancing.
Exactly. And you know what? Hey, Sunglasses Kid is a party in your ears. I'll tell you right there, because you can throw on Sunglasses Kid. Everybody out there, you can throw on Sunglasses Kid and you could make that whole dance floor start moving right away, because I tell you, people love those grooves. People love that R&B, that new Jak Swing style, that, you know what I mean? They I don't know, it just makes people come alive, especially here in LA. So thank you for making amazing music, because it is rad.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very, very kind of you.
What is your favorite album/EP that you've ever worked on?
Well, I mean, I asked you this beforehand because I that makes it sound like I've put out lots and I've been incredibly lazy and slow moving throughout my career, quote unquote career. So I've only actually done one EP and one album, and then I probably had 30 or 40 singles. So I guess I would have to say my favorite album would be the only album I have out there. Would be Graduation. I had made an EP beforehand called Unpredictable. I was one of the first people within the synthwave scene, certainly, to start kind of using a lot of singers and doing a lot of collaborations. And I did that across Unpredictable, and I worked with saxophone players and R&B singers and people who had nothing to do with the synthwave scene. And then sort of the Graduation, the sort of reason I came up with the name was it had sort of twofold kind of meaning. One was obviously the kind of high school sort of connotation to it, and the kind of John Hughes kind of vibe and everything, and the other was sort of to mean to say that it was kind of me graduating from kind of making lots of singles and doing lots of smaller things to kind of trying to scale up the project a bit. And yeah, I guess the thing that I liked the most about that, other than the music, was designing the artwork for the album cover, which is quite an experience. And it's nice to see, especially when it came out on vinyl. It's nice to see my own sort of artwork there. Actually, that's not the most fun. That's not the thing I was most favorite about. That was a nice aspect of it. I guess it was just seeing it all come together and working with so many different people. It's quite a it's not a small feat that when nearly every track you have is a collaboration. And that's the same with the new album that I'm working on, that's going to be called Sophomore, which again is kind of about sort of keeping with that high school feeling. And also I actually discovered, whilst I was thinking about names, that sophomore is often what they refer to as someone's second album, their sophomore album. So again, I'm being incredibly clever with my album titles, but it is a huge undertaking, kind of working with so many different singers you've got, or musicians. You've got the legal side of things, doing splits and agreements on, you're co-writing something with people, so there's a kind of agreement between you and the singer. And then there's also kind of, they become your client, you become their client a bit. So you're sort of working things out. You're having to negotiate relationships. Things may go wrong. You may have to kind of give people feedback, or you may have to change things. You may get back something you don't expect. So it's always this kind of plate spinning operation. So, even right now I have, I don't know, 2 vocalists working on something right now, and still everything's still in play. So it's very, so yeah, I guess graduation would be my favorite experience doing that. And just hearing it all come together. The only thing I regret about graduation was not telling Rhyme Time to change his lyric about a female president in 2016. I thought at the time, because it was before Trump had got elected, and at the time I was like, I've got a feeling Trump might win the election, and should I tell him to change this lyric? Because I'm a bit worried that actually, I was a little bit worried about all the lyrics kind of dating it a little bit too much. I think there's always a risk when you put in some very like contemporary cultural reference into a song. But I remember seeing the YouTube comments on that and people going, "A female president in 2016, lol." And I was like, oh, of course, that's the one thing they're zoning on.
Well, I love that song, and it's funny. I've DJ'd it at San Junipero before, and it was funny because when I did DJ that track, and people were listening to it, people were dancing to it, people were grooving to it. It was like when that part came on, nobody questioned anything. They're just like, I'm good with it. I'm good with it. I'm enjoying it. You know what I mean? In a lot of people's minds, they're like, well, it could have been, but unfortunately, it's the other way. But that's a whole other subject. But it's great what you were talking about graduation. That album, it was such a great album. I have, like you were talking, a lot of great collaborations on it, a lot of great work that you did musically on it. I mean, it is just like, you're right. It keeps it that high school. It's that high school vibe, but yet it really just kind of like, it's so eclectic in its own right, you know what I mean? With so many great elements that were put together in that, and your new album, Sophomore, that's going to continue to touch upon some of those things and do a little bit more collaborations. I'm super excited to hear that album in its entirety. Like, I want to get my hands on it, like, now, you know what I mean? I'm sure it's going to be amazing.
I hope so. I mean, the engineer who's mixing it, and because I mixed Graduation myself. Obviously, it was mastered by somebody else, but this time round, the engineer who's mixing it also just mixed "Stranger Love," which is the song that I just did with Ollie Ride, Ollie from who you'll know from Running in the Night and FM84, and we did a song called "Stranger Love," which is doing really well on YouTube at the moment. And yeah, the engineer, the mixer, we had him on board because there was a moment where we were writing that song and I was just like, Ollie, I think we've got something here, and I don't want to be the guy responsible for screwing it up with my average mixing. So I think we should get somebody to mix it, and we both agreed. And Israel was a mutual friend of Ollie's and Michael Oakley's, who Michael Oakley was also involved in helping us mix the track a bit. And so I asked Israel to stick around and help me out on Sophomore, because again, I think for me, I think being a producer, you're sort of expected to be a kind of jack of all trades, and the technical stuff, the mixing side of things, whilst it's something I can obviously do, I think it's a skill set to, if you're going to really hone that skill set, you should sort of, I think I wanted to spend more time composing than worrying about the mixing, and just knowing that somebody else is going to come in and kind of take it to the next level takes that pressure off you when you're trying to concentrate on the compositional elements of a song, that you're going, okay, this sounds a little bit rough, but this is a good enough state that Israel's going to pick this up and take it across the finish line. I just need to kind of focus on writing a good tune. So it's made this album even more of a collaboration, because you've got a singer in San Diego, you've got an engineer in San Diego, a singer in Australia, a producer in London, so it's a truly kind of collaborative, internet only experience, really. which is why during the lockdown I was like, nothing's really changed about the way we've certainly saw a lot of synthwave producers have been making stuff. We've been doing it from behind a computer in our homes and using all the online tools already. So this is all kind of business as usual for a lot of us.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, you know, you're making it all happen from the comfort of your home, and you're continuing to do it. You know, that's even through all of this, you're still continuing to create and still create, you know, using that time to work with other people and build something amazing. And I'm sure once this album drops, it's going to be one for the books, because I know coming from you, it's some really amazing stuff. So thank you for that.
Well, don't thank me yet. You may not like it. I mean, I do feel a little bit of pressure, especially that's again what I mean about kind of almost sort of blocking out those voices of saying, you know, oh, you know, that song you did was amazing or anything. I'm kind of like, I think, you know, there's being careful of believing your own hype, and also there's kind of not getting too comfortable and then starting to think that whatever everything you do is amazing. Every time I start a new song, I'm going, fuck, I don't know what I'm doing. Don't know how I don't have any chord sequences. I don't know what I've got. Maybe an idea, and there's this kind of it's a bit like rock climbing, which I used to do, you know, climbing a really hard wall, and you can't even see the first hold, and then suddenly you manage to get a finger onto what looks like a flat wall, and then as you start to go, then you start to think, okay, I've sort of broken the back of this idea here. And then especially if you get a great singer, like I've literally got on my computer here a session I've just bounced out with Primo the Alien, who she was singing. People might have seen her recently singing live on the Midnight's live stream. They did a charity live stream on YouTube, and she was one of the supporting artists. And she's got a great voice, and she's an incredible singer and songwriter. And she just came back with this vocal for this track that we're working on, and just absolutely nailed it. And that's the kind of magic moment where you're going, because I don't really give singers direction, and I don't necessarily know what they're going to come back with, other than I say broadly, you know, maybe, you know, something about this or maybe something about that, or I don't really give them too much. And then it's a kind of cross your fingers and see what comes back. And when it comes back and it's amazing, you're like, oh, fuck, this is it. Yes, we've got something. And you kind of know it. You know it when you hear it. And sometimes you come back and go, it's not quite it. And those are the more challenging moments when it kind of doesn't quite go according to plan.
Well, see, that's great, you know, because, you know, Primo, she has a great voice, you know what I mean? She's great music. You know, we just did an interview with her recently. She was a couple interviews back, you know, really fun person, really, you know, down to earth, you know what I mean? And I didn't have a chance to see that live stream with her on it. You know, I wish I had the chance to, but you know what? We were talking about it, and she had an amazing time doing that. And it's great to see that you're working with her on a track. So I mean, I already know that I'm gonna like it, because if history has taught me anything about your music, is that it's really great stuff, and you know, I'm gonna be impressed with it. I know a lot of people are too.
Well, thank you. I think where things take time is that because it's so collaborative, like I say, it's sort of plate spinning. Some of it's been about kind of singers that you work with have things going on. They don't always get things done as quickly as you might hope. So someone like Primo turned around this song within, I think, sort of, it was about 2 weeks, and all kinds of logistical things when you're doing international. So literally, like working with Miranda Carey, she's in Australia, so the time design difference means that there can end up being almost nearly a sort of 48-hour lag if you get desequenced. So there'll be moments where it's like, I had a moment the other day where it was like 3:30 in the morning, and I'm lying in bed having done a late producing session, and I've got my phone and I'm like, right, I better go to sleep now. And simultaneously I get a DM from Primo with the vocals and an email from Miranda with her vocals. And so then I'm suddenly like, oh, fuck, and now I've got to hear what Miranda's done. Don't know what she's done. Got to hear what Primo's done. So I'm sitting up in bed downloading, you know, reference mixes and like lying in bed with my girlfriend sleeping, going, oh, yes, yeah, oh god, I just got it, yeah, nailed it, brilliant. So you have these kind of crazy sort of time zone moments where you're doing things at, you know, 3 or 4 in the morning. And luckily I'm a night owl, so
It's, that's always how it is. It's always a building process. You know what I mean? It's always a building process, always late nights. That's just the way it is. And when you get something that comes through, you got to listen to it right then and there, because if you wait on it and you try to go to sleep, you're never going to get sleep. You're never going to get it. It's just not going to happen.
Well, that's it. You've just this. It's a kind of tentative moment where you're kind of, like I say, you're crossing your fingers, going, please, please, please be sort of, you're willing it to be kind of right. And sometimes the kind of most interesting ones are the moments where someone does something that you it's completely not what you had in mind. So it's not that they've missed the mark. It's that it was completely not what you had in mind. And those are the ones where you have to resist feeding back quickly, because you have to sit and live with it. So say the singer has been living with this and working on this for this last several weeks, days, hours, whatever, and they've gone through a process, a journey to get to this idea. You haven't been on that journey with them. You're just getting this immediate thing there. And so sometimes I even remember with Can't Hide with Miranda, she sent over Can't Hide, and I was like, shit, that's not what I had in mind at all. And it's kind of the vibe, but it's not quite what I had in mind. And then 20 listens later, I was like, actually, yeah, this is brilliant. This is much better than what I had in mind. But it took me that time. So I've learned ever since then to kind of say, especially with Miranda. So when I got back her track from Miranda the first time around, I just said to myself mentally, remember, she won't possibly have done what you think she should do, but remember that she's really good. So whatever she's done will be great. And you just may need to take a little moment to adjust. So don't go shooting back any DMs saying what you think of something immediately. Sit there, listen to it a good dozen times, absorb it, and then kind of, and it was the same sort of thing. It was kind of, oh, okay. Oh, yeah. So
Right.
yeah, actually this time around, the track that she's just sent over I was just immediately like, yes, she's got it. First listen, I was like, great.
I'm ready for it. What was the drive behind getting you into making music and performing?
I mean, making music's something that I've done on and off most of my life. I actually always wanted to be an actor, but my mum is a classically trained pianist and was a piano teacher, and I grew up and songwriter, and she did stuff for amateur theatre and things. So I kind of grew up with a grand piano underneath my bedroom as a teenager, and as a child and a teenager, and hearing songs being composed all the time. And my mum also, in the kind of early 90s, bought a Korg M1, which is a kind of iconic synthesizer workstation keyboard that's used across a lot of sort of 90s dance and music. And so I grew up with that around the house a bit. But yeah, I wanted to be an actor. Then I wanted to be a filmmaker. I went to film school. But it was whilst I was at film school, there was a Norwegian, a 6'2" Norwegian chap called Ingmar, who was a fantastic director, and he also scored his own movies using another Korg, and he had a bunch of software. And I was really inspired by what he was doing, and he hooked me up with a load of illicit software on a CD, and I started making kind of breakbeat, and I was terribly inspired by electronic music like DJ Shadow and Uncle and Orbital and Left Field and people like that. And I was making this sort of ambient electronica. And then this kind of moment dawned on me that, oh, I love film, I love music, I should be a film composer. And I pursued a career in that, not realizing quite how hard that was to become successful in. And I kind of gave up a bit on the whole music thing, thinking, yeah, then this is just too hard, and I'm going to be unemployed and penniless artist or an unemployable loser, so I'm going to need to get a job. And I ended up kind of pursuing a sort of day job in marketing, but I was between jobs at one point in 2013. And I just started making music again, just for fun. And I was just making all kinds of styles of music. And I started making just an 80s style tune just for the sheer fun of it. And I think around that same time, I had seen Drive, and I had heard the Night Call Kavinsky song, which always tends to be the kind of the inspiration for a lot of my sort of generation of musicians. But I think there was something around wanting to do more kind of fun, light-hearted stuff. I'd had my sort of fill of writing serious, deadly serious music where I wanted to be cinematic and orchestral, and killing myself trying to make this terribly complicated music. And I decided, you know what, this is just me. This is just for fun. This isn't a career. I've got my job now. I'm just doing this for fun on the side. And maybe I'll put some things on SoundCloud just to sort of see if anyone's enjoying it. But it was very much not a plan to become, Sunglasses Kid was not a plan. Sunglasses Kid was a username. I came up with it. It's literally the name of a preset on a VST that I use called the Korg Wave Station. It's literally like there's an electric piano called Sunglasses Kid, and it was as lazy and as ill thought out as that. And I just, because I needed a profile username for SoundCloud, and I just was sticking up. I was making a song a day and putting a song up on SoundCloud with literally no thought about anything. And it was actually really through collaborating, through asking people if they wanted to collaborate and putting things in my bio about that I was looking for singers and things like that, that singers started reaching out to me. And I think it was the collaboration bit of it, the networking bit of it, that started to then sort of organically grow it. And then I had a singer approach me, and he was really excited about what I was doing. And I was like, really? I don't know, this is a bit shit what I'm doing. But he said, no, I love it, man. And he ended up singing on a few tracks we did together, and I think he's called, his artist name is Leon Monroe, and he's based out of Miami, and he's a kind of R&B singer. And when he started top lining my songs, they sounded really good. He elevated them. They were still kind of rough songs, but he was a great songwriter, and I think he was a really big inspiration for me right from the start, of going, oh, there is something here. Maybe I should kind of try and take this a bit more seriously, because this is a great tune, but it's just a bit of a rubbish mix, and I've done it a bit lazily and everything, and maybe I should pursue this, and maybe there's something here. So Leon was a really big inspiration for me. And also when we worked together, he would do things like he'd chop around my song and say, no man, that's too long, that intro. You got to get the intro down in like 10 seconds and be into the track. And he actually taught me quite a bit about sort of structuring a pop song as well. So I would actually cite him. I've never said this to him, but I would cite him as one of my inspirations for kind of keeping going with it and taking it a bit more seriously and approaching it more like kind of proper pop songs. So yeah, and then as I grew, people started asking me, oh, when are you going to play live? When are you doing this? When are you doing that? And when are you selling music? When are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know where I'm playing. I don't know. But then I think around this, I don't know, 2015, 16, promoters all started universally trying to make live shows happen, because they literally just weren't happening before then. And I got invited, like I said, by Joel from the Night Arcade in Amsterdam to come and play, and then that was that. Yeah.
The rest is history, you know what I mean? So that's just great that you're on your journey, starting out just making some music here and there for fun, and look at where it's taken you. It's so great to see that you're on this path. There's really no generalized direction that you're going to go. It's just however you feel from day to day, from moment to moment. So congratulations.
Yeah, I think. Well, thank you. I think I would say that perhaps as synthwave has become more sort of established as a genre, there are more sort of what I would call established rules and tropes of the sound. And so I think for sort of third, fourth, fifth generation producers, there's more references out there for them to draw on, and more kind of artists to go, I want to be like that artist, I want to be like that artist. When I started out, there was Future Cop, Mitch Murder. Those were the two guys that I sort of found who weren't Kavinsky. And when I found Mitch Murder, he was the guy who I went, oh, this guy's being silly and fun and gives me permission to do what I actually secretly want to do, which is this kind of more silly, fun stuff. And yeah, I think I always sort of secretly was wondering, does anyone else enjoy like sax solos and funk as much as I do? Or am I the only person who secretly thinks this is actually cool and I'm not being ironic, I'm not being tongue in cheek? So yeah, it was almost like an experiment just to see, like, does anyone like this? So for me, I was out on a limb. I was out a bit on my own. Like I said, apart from Mitch Murder, there wasn't anyone else going, well, he's doing it and he's doing great, so I'll copy him. And there wasn't really a sound like what I was doing. So I was sort of inventing my own sound. So the only place I had to go was back to the original 80s like artists like Scree Policy and Bobby Brown and The System and the new Jak Syn sort of producers and Jam and Lewis and Janet Jackson. So I was going back to those albums and going, what were they doing that was so cool? And taking a piece from this and a piece from that and put them together and made my own sort of sound. So in a way it was quite sort of scary because, like I said, there wasn't somebody out there apart from, like I say, Mitch Murder was the only one really who I was looking ahead to going, okay, I don't want to copy him, but he is doing the sort of atmosphere and style of what I want to do, and he's doing it well, and he's sort of the pace car for me.
But see, you know what? Like, you know, you mentioned Future Cop and Mitch Murder. Love both those artists. Fell in love with Future Cop, one of the first artists I've heard in this, you know, in the genre that is now, I guess, you know, what we call synthwave. But fell in love with Future Cop, and I'm telling you, there weren't a lot of artists like a decade ago. You know what I mean? Because now it's like a decade. It's been out for a decade. It's crazy, like how you know it's been going for a decade. But you know what? It's really great that, you know, these trailblazers have opened up doors for you, and so on and so forth. And here we are down the road, and you're still making amazing music. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Dave.
What are you looking forward to accomplishing the most moving forward?
I think obviously the thing I'm looking forward to most would be finishing the album, which, like I said, I'm now beginning to get excited. I was at the kind of I was through the difficult middle act where my horse was drowning in the swamp, and I thought I wasn't going to make it. And now I'm at the end of the journey and going, okay, this actually now is going to come together, hopefully, as a sort of finished article. This I can now start to see that this is going to work. And I think after this album is sort of finished and released, I'm going to be turning my attention a little bit more to actually co-writing and ghost producing a bit. So I've been doing some things behind the scenes with Ollie Ride, and working a bit more with him. And we've struck up a really great relationship, actually, and he's become a really good friend. And I'm hoping to sort of try and sort of diversify what I'm doing a bit. And you may hear less of me, but more of me in other ways. You may not know you're hearing me, but you may hear me in different guises. But that's kind of the plan at the moment. And my latest thing that I'm considering doing is starting a Patreon, but I'm not sure whether that's just like me begging for money. But people tell me I give away a lot of my trade secrets, and so maybe I was thinking about doing something for sort of super fans where I could start kind of giving them more tutorials, giving them behind the scenes kind of demos, taking them through how I go about making tracks. And just because I do get asked a lot from particularly like newer producers, like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I'd never put myself forward as like an expert on how do you produce, but I think I can tell people how I produced that song or how I do this sound, if that's what you're interested in. So excited about everything except live music. I don't know when that's happening, but apparently I've just heard that I just saw a post from my good friend Ollie saying that his live show is back in March in London. So it was postponed. It was supposed to happen just before the lockdown happened in London around April. It's been postponed till March 2021. But I'll still be very looking forward to him seeing him perform our song on stage.
Well, I look forward to that as well. And you know what? Like, being able to hear you in whatever capacity that you're going to put yourself out in, I'm excited for it. And you know what?
Oh, thank you.
Seeing a masterclass, like, you know, having a Patreon, you know, I look forward to seeing a Sunglasses Kid masterclass. To be like, hi, this is Sunglasses Kid, and this is your masterclass. You know what I mean? I love that. Great. I like your little tips and tricks here and there. I mean, that's awesome. So, I mean, you're going to be contributing to the world, even as just a producer. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. You're still getting your stuff out into the world. You know, you're still helping to push that music forward.
Yeah, and I think thanks for noticing the sort of clips and things I put out on Instagram, particularly. I think I was doing that quite a lot, really, because I wanted people to know that, look, I'm not, whilst I've been a bit quiet for the last few years, I am still working on things, and the album is still coming, and not everything that I'm putting clips out of is even going to be necessarily in the album. And so I think what people don't realize is, you know, an album, when you write an album, you don't necessarily go, right, I've written 10 tracks, those are the 10 tracks. Sometimes you may write 15, 20 pieces, and then you're sort of whittling it down, going, well, now I've got this, that song doesn't quite work, and those two sound too similar, and that one's actually quite weak. Now I've made this one's turned out so well, I can't really include that one now. So I've got a lot of music that will never really see the light of day. And so I think, again, for like something like Patreon started to make sense to me as a place where I could kind of put things out to people without this sort of pressure of calling it an officially released song and expecting people to pay money for it, but to say, this is the kind of thing I could share with you and say, like, here's an instrumental, here's an idea, here's a demo, and people can start building their sort of unofficial playlist, their sort of, bootleg Sunglasses Kid albums of their own.
Well, I look forward to that. I look forward to seeing you do that, and I think it's going to be a great idea, and I think it's going to go a long way. So sooner rather than later, everybody out there, be on the lookout, because it's coming. It's going to come. It's going to happen. I know it right here. What positive message would you give your fans out there?
I suppose I was actually thinking about this the other day, if I had to say something that's sort of positive, and I think this is both directed at sort of musicians and maybe a bit more towards sort of musicians and creators, of which a lot of my fans are people making music, but also to fans as well, is that kind of having a creative hobby, whether that's or a pastime, whether that you're lucky enough to make that your job or lucky enough to make that pay money, or whether it's just a hobby or something. I think it's really important to sort of find that kind of meaning, find that purpose, and have something creative in your life. And I think right now with the pandemic, and I know with America, there's a lot of sort of unrest and a lot of dissatisfaction. And I think music and the arts, particularly, they are an important kind of, they're important both to give you sort of meaning as a creator, as somebody who's making and doing something yourself and focusing you, but also as it, particularly for listeners and for people in the synthwave community particularly, there's a sort of escapism. And I think it's more important than ever to still have that kind of fantasy world to kind of go to. Like I earlier I jokingly said about I made a Never-Ending Story reference. I wasn't sure if you got it, but Never-Ending Story is a movie that's about a child that's sort of escaping into a sort of fantasy world, escaping away from like the horrors of his daily life, being bullied by the other kids and everything. And the story that he reads is actually a story that's a sort of foreshadowing about kind of not letting the imagination and creativity die. And that is the kind of nothingness. The nothingness is sort of giving up on creativity and giving up on being imaginative. And so I think whatever's going on in your life, no matter how bad things seem, the arts and being creative is always a place you can kind of return to, either to listen to what people are doing, or consume, or watch or look at what other people are doing, or if you can, to sort of focus on ways of creating your own stuff. And even if no one's listening, even if no one's looking at what you're doing, if it gives you pleasure and it gives you sort of that extra purpose in life and it gives you meaning, then it's worth pursuing. And that's definitely how I started out as a musician. I did it for me. I wasn't doing it to try and get people to listen. That was a sort of nice byproduct, but I think, I was doing it because it was making me happy at a time that was, Sunglasses Kid actually came out of quite a dark moment in my life, where I was sort of given up a bit on music. And so it kind of, brought me back from the brink a bit. And so that for me is the value of sort of art and music and film, and everyone should try and keep creativity in their life a bit. And I think, right now it's an even more important sort of vaccination against the chaos of this sort of the times we're living in.
I agree with that. You know what? And those are really wise words right there, everybody. Take those in from Edward right here. That, don't give up on your creativity. Don't let that go. Always hold on to that. Always keep pushing with that, because some of the greatest things that have came in human history were because people stayed creative and people stayed true to who they are. So during all of this time, during any point in your life, whenever you feel like you're in a certain area that may not be maybe the most productive for you, just hold on to that idea that, you know what, I'm not going to let my imagination die. I'm not going to let it fall to the wayside, because I can always dip into this. I can always create. I can always build off of it, because no one can take that away from me. We just have to remember that we have it inside of us. So thank you so much for taking this time to sit down and have this conversation today, Edward. Thank you to everybody who took the time to watch us today. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to our Tour Fiend YouTube channel as we have many more awesome artist interviews on the way. So to everybody out there, thank you so much. Thank you, Edward, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.
Thanks, Jack. Take care.